This is a quick setup video for the Honeywell T775 Series 2000 controllers. These controllers can come configured with 0, 1, 2, or 4 relays and 0 or 2 modulating outputs. Even though every version can accept 2 sensor inputs, there is only one sensor in the box, so you got to keep that in mind when you're buying this controller, that if you need 2 sensors, you need to buy the extra one before heading to the job site. A nice feature of this control is the programming lock that can be enabled by holding the home and menu buttons. As you can see, when it's fully enabled, the little lock icon shows up in the bottom of the screen. We'll take that off for this demo because we need to access the full programming menu. Holding the home and menu buttons takes that lock off the screen. When you first come across one of these controls in the field, you can quickly cycle through the current set points by pressing the right arrow button as follows. Here you'll see the set point and which sensor it's configured to. This is now showing the mod 1, the next press shows mod 2, relay 1, relay 2, and it's also a unique feature as it tells you whether or not if the schedule is enabled, whether or not it's showing the set point or the setback. And that will quickly tell you if the schedule is enabled and it's in setback mode, that the actual target temperature is a set point or a setback. The first step to getting one of these controllers configured is to get it into programming mode. A 5-second push of the menu button gets you into that mode. Here you can set up the sensors, whether you're using 1 or 2, the units that you want, Celsius or Fahrenheit. You can calibrate it if you want, but usually this is not required. And you can label it with one of these unique preset labels that may or may not represent your sensor measurement a little bit better than just having the sensor A or sensor B configuration. Once your sensor is configured, you can configure the sensor B, or you can go back and now configure the modulating outputs. Here, you can set the type of output you want, whether that's going to be a 4 to 20, a 0 to 10, 2 to 10, or a Series 90 controller. Minimum outputs, if this was operating for a mixed air controller, you may want to have a minimum position on the damper. Integral control, if you wanted to get more precise integral configuration. Derivative, which is not typically used in HVAC applications. And you can also configure the schedule, whether or not you want this set point to be controlled by the schedule or not. If you're not using the modulation 1, you can hide it from the home screen and it won't appear when you try to cycle through the settings. Once the modulating outputs are configured, you can then move on to configure how many relays you're going to be using. You can skip the options for now and then configure the relay. Do you want it to be used with the scheduler or not? This is to reset the runtime if you're going to enable runtime display on the home screen. Once the relays are configured, the modulation outputs are configured, you can then go to the options. The options allow you to configure whether or not you're going to use the scheduler. You can get minimum off times, minimum on times. The DI option is whether or not you're going to use a separate input to control a setback or some other special temperature feature of the device by some external input. Here you can show whether or not you're going to show the runtime hours of the relays. And a special feature is the sync button. The sync button, when you configure it on, this allows you to have the number 1 set point to be the master. Then any changes of the number 1 set point will then affect any other set point within the program. So say you had the number one set point set at 50, an increase of 5 degrees of the number one set point would then in turn increase every other set point 5 degrees. Once all the inputs and outputs are configured, you can go back to the home screen, press the menu button, and here you will have the programming schedule. This allows you to now configure the set points. What temperature do you want? What throttling range? Which sensor is connected to which output? Totally configurable. Whether or not that sensor is going to be working as a heating sensor or a cooling sensor, or a heating output or a cooling output. This just means that in heating mode, the output ramps up as temperature drops below set point. Cool mode means that the output ramps up as temperature rises above the set point. The setback allows you to set a temperature in addition to the set point that when the schedule is active or the digital input is active, this is now the new set point temperature. Programming of the relay outputs is very similar to the modulating outputs. There's a set point. Instead of a throttling range, it's a differential, but has the same effect, except it's going on and off at the end of this differential. You can configure which sensor you're using with which output, heat or cool mode, and once again the set point depending on whether you're using the scheduler or not.